Coming up in this edition of Airborne, AOPA forms an investment group with questionable leadership. The Bahamas extends their waiver on 406 ELTs. And a French appellate court overturns the Concorde convictions. I'm Ashley Hale. Welcome to Airborne on Aero-TV. Well, AOPA was busy over the holiday weekend as it moved to form the AOPA Holding Corporation, a presumably for-profit group charged with investing in aviation businesses. While that move raises questions of its own, the choice of the man to lead the group raises even more. In a leadership update, AOPA President Craig Fuller announced the hiring of Michael Skarzinski as a consultant to, quote, finalize our 2013 investment strategies and the work of AOPA Holdings, end quote. In early January of 2010, Skarzinski tendered his voluntary resignation from his position at Arbitron, where he had served as the president and CEO. The resignation followed revelations in which, according to the Wall Street Journal, he admitted to a false statement made in his testimony before a U.S. congressional committee. In a 2010 statement, Arbitron Executive Vice President Alton Adams noted that, quote, Mr. Skarzinski's actions were inconsistent with our corporate values, which state unambiguously that honesty and integrity come first. With such a negative pedigree of recent note, one wonders why AOPA would take a chance on a person who had the potential to embarrass the organization and via a project that could put him in charge of tens of millions of AOPA member dollars. Perhaps the answer is found further in Fuller's update, wherein he says, quote, I have known Michael for many years. He has effectively built successful businesses by creating strong teams of people around the enterprises with which he has become involved, end quote. The ethical issues inherent in this series of events seems ponderous. There, of course, remains the central issue of how a pivotal industry organization doing business as a nonprofit legal entity can have any aspect connected to for-profit operations. AOPA dismissed our concerns and denied our request to interview Mr. Skarzinski. There's much more to come on this story. Well, if you rushed out and bought a 406 ELT based on our report last week that the Bahamas would soon require installation of such equipment, I hope you kept your receipt. The Civil Aviation Ministry of the Bahamas has extended the waiver for the installation of the 406 ELT devices past its February 1st, 2013 deadline. The exemption, made under the provision of the Civil Aviation Regulations 2001, Section 2, and the Bahamas Safety Air Regulations 2001, applies to all Bahamas commercial operators, general aviation aircraft flying in or over the Bahamas, balloons, gliders, and lighter than air. The Bahamas Civil Aviation said in a news release that it will review this policy in 24 months. A French appellate court has overturned involuntary manslaughter convictions against the former Continental Airlines and mechanic John Taylor, stemming from a July 2000 accident involving an Air France Concorde SST. 113 people were fatally injured when the plane caught fire on takeoff and went down in a residential area. A French court had found both the airline and the mechanic guilty of involuntary manslaughter when it determined that a metal strip, which had fallen from a Continental DC-10, had caused one of the SST's tires to rupture during its takeoff roll. Pieces of the tire were said to have punctured the fuel tanks, causing the fire. The New York Times reports that while the appellate court did not challenge the lower court's findings, it said the manslaughter charge was unjustified. It upheld a payment of about $1.3 million to Air France for, quote, damage to its image. William Voss, president of the Flight Safety Foundation, said that the aviation community would view the verdict with a sense of relief, saying, quote, "It reminds us that human error, regardless of the tragic outcome, is different than a crime," end quote. Europe's unmanned combat air vehicle stealth technology demonstrator, the nEUROn, successfully completed its maiden flight on December 1st. Similar in size and configuration to the X-47B, developed by Northrop Grumman and currently being tested by the U.S. Navy. The nEUROn program was launched in 2005 by Dassault and involves France, Italy, Sweden, Spain, Greece, and Switzerland. With a length of 30 feet, a wingspan of 41 feet, and an empty weight of 5 tons, the aircraft is powered by a Rolls-Royce Turbomeca Adour engine. The nEUROn will continue to undergo testing in France until 2014, to be followed by operational testing in Sweden and firing and stealth measurements testing in Italy. You're watching Airborne. More in just a moment when we come back.
Since the early days of powered flight, pilots have struggled with landing in crosswinds and learning proper crosswind landing techniques. Even today, most crosswind landing skills are learned through trial and error, sometimes with disastrous results. Believe it or not, the most common contributing factor in weather-related accidents each year is crosswinds. The second most common factor is wind gusts. In fact, crosswinds and wind gusts cause more landing accidents than fog, thunderstorms, and icing combined. That's where the Redbird X-Wind SE comes in. It teaches pilots the proper techniques to meet and beat these top 2 causes of weather-related landing accidents. By placing pilots in gusty crosswind conditions for extended periods of time, the X-Wind SE gives instructors all the time they need to teach the pilot the proper techniques for landing in challenging crosswind conditions. For more information on Redbird flight simulations, the Redbird X-Wind SE, and Redbird's entire line of flight training devices, visit www.redbirdflightsimulations.com.
Welcome back. Remember, if you'd like to suggest a story for Airborne, Aero-TV, our website, or a podcast, you can always drop us an email to news-spy@aero-news.net. Well, it's rare that gaining weight is looked on as a good thing. But that's just the case as Airbus has increased its maximum takeoff weight capability of its A330-200 and 300 models to 266 tons, along with an increased fuel capacity option for the 300 that will be available for operators in 2015. The new takeoff weight capability, combined with the fuel capacity increase, enables operators of these new A330-300s to carry additional payloads on longer missions. Overall, the full payload range now increases by around 500 nautical miles over today's 259-ton A330-300, and by around 350 nautical miles over today's 262-ton A330-200. The A330-300's optional fuel capacity increase will be achieved by activating the center wing take for the first time on this model. The U.S. Navy moved a step closer to being able to operate a UAV from an aircraft carrier. However, the test was conducted on dry land. Tom Patton explains.
There are only a couple of options for launching an aircraft from the deck of a ship. And when it comes to the X-47B unmanned aircraft that the Navy has in development, there's really only one way. It needs to be launched using a catapult like most Navy aircraft. The U.S. Navy, along with Northrop Grumman, have conducted the first catapult launch of an unmanned system using the X-47B, but the test was conducted at a shore-based catapult facility at Naval Air Station Patuxent River in Maryland. It marks the first of several shore-based catapult-to-flight tests that will be performed before the Navy attempts a catapult launch of the X-47B from a ship. Following the catapult launch, the aircraft conducted a test flight over the Chesapeake Bay near Pax River. The flight included several maneuvers designed to simulate tasks that the aircraft will have to perform when it lands on a ship, including flying in a typical ship holding pattern and executing a carrier approach flight profile. Over the next few weeks, the program expects to conduct several shore-based Catapult launches at Pax River. Meanwhile, another X-47B is currently aboard the USS Truman, where its ability to maneuver around the deck is being tested. For Airborne, I'm Tom Patton.
A NASA spacecraft studying Mercury has provided compelling support for the long-held hypothesis that the planet harbors abundant water, ice, and other frozen volatile materials within its permanently shadowed polar craters. The new information comes from NASA's Mercury Surface Space Environment, Geochemistry, and Ranging spacecraft. Given its proximity to the Sun, Mercury would seem to be an unlikely place to find ice. However, the tilt of Mercury's rotational axis is less than 1 degree, and as a result, there are pockets of the planet's poles that never see the sunlight. Scientists suggested decades ago that there might be water, ice, and other frozen volatiles trapped at Mercury's poles. Messengers onboard instruments have been studying Mercury in unprecedented detail since its historic arrival there in March of 2011. The spacecraft recorded dark patches with diminished reflectance, consistent with the theory that ice in those areas is covered by a thermally insulating layer. Well, it's Tuesday and time for AVW, our Aero video of the week. Anyone who holds a pilot certificate knows the anxiety, tension, stress, and pure exhilaration of that first solo flight. Today, we share that solo experience firsthand, thanks to a young cadet in the Civil Air Patrol. To enjoy her first solo, search YouTube for My First Glider Solo. Sharklets, those 8-foot-tall wingtip devices that Airbus says will reduce fuel burn and emission by improving the aerodynamics of an aircraft while also extending its range, have been approved by the European Airworthiness Authorities, and FAA certification is expected in the near future. Specifically, EASA has approved the Sharklets on Airbus A320s with CFM engines. But since the testing process included aircraft with the V2500 engine, approval of the remaining aircraft engine variants is expected in the coming months. Due to what Airbus says is very strong customer demand for Sharklets, all Airbus single-aisle final assembly lines will be engaged in building A320 family aircraft with the devices. These FALs are located in Toulouse, Hamburg, and Tianjin, and will soon be followed by an additional A320 FAL in Alabama. Sharklets are an option on new-build aircrafts and are standard on the A320neo family. Airbus has been in a dispute with aviation partners Boeing over the devices, which the smaller company says infringe on its patent for blended winglets. Get comprehensive, real-time, 24/7 coverage of the latest aviation and aerospace stories anytime at Aero-News.net. I'm Ashley Hale. Thanks for watching.